Travis, Barn Parts, doing a little video on the new Driveshaft Saver, and that would be this device right here. So what's going on here with these is the tolerance between the bearing inner race and the drive shaft is too loose. As you can see, I can just freely slide this bearing and flip the shaft upside down. The bearing just falls right off. So yeah, the inner race spins on the shaft and then it prematurely wears down the drive shaft. So a lot of guys are getting these covered under warranty, but so we wanted to come up with a solution to prevent that from happening. And the way this works is when you draw this bolt in, it pulls this tapered wedge in and it expands the three fingers, which in turn expands the drive shaft just enough so that the tolerance is tightened up between the bearing and the shaft. So when you go to install this, before you install it, you want to put some grease on the wedge, the tapered wedge surfaces that ride along the fingers, and put some grease on them three fingers. I put some grease on the threads, and I also put a little bit underneath the bolt head. We found that without the grease, just the frictional force in the device alone would trip the torque wrench, rather prematurely before you would get, any significant expansion on the device. So when you install it, this one's been cycled a couple times, so I gotta just tap it in like that. A new one, when you install it for the first time, it's going to just slide right in because it's never been expanded at all. So just to demonstrate here, I've got this torque wrench set at I think it's 30 foot-pounds, and just tighten this down. This is really going to be a bi-feel installation. We're going to highly recommend that you actually loosen up the assembly from the tunnel. There's 3 bolts that house that bearing, and then that gets bolted to the tunnel. So if you take those bolts out or loosen them up, then you should be able to kind of gauge, be able to slide that back and forth while it's on the machine and see how loose it is. So for demonstration, I got about 30 foot-pounds of torque, and there's just enough resistance there now that I can still pull the bearing off, work it back on, but it definitely has some resistance. I can flip this upside down now and the bearing no longer falls off. So that's 30 foot-pounds. It's going to vary from machine to machine, so I would say start at the 25-30 foot-pound range, and then maybe bump up in 5 foot-pound increments until you get a somewhat snug fit. I don't think we want to go overboard and crank it so tight that you can't budge this by hand at all. I think, as with chassis flex, I think there should be a little bit of give if that shaft needs to shift a little bit, that it can. A nice feature with this design is that you can, if you want to take an assembly apart to repack that bearing, you just simply loosen up the bolt. Once you got the bolt loose, you'll see that there's still some resistance even with the bolt loose, because that wedge stays seated. So to unseat the wedge, just give it a quick shot with a hammer, and now you can see the bearing falls right off as that shaft relaxes. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, there's not going to be one definitive torque spec that's going to work for all machines, but like I say, I would start in that 25-30 foot-pound range, and then loosen up this assembly if it's still on the machine, and then just kind of go by feel as far as you know, how much frictional force you feel between the bearing and the shaft there. So thanks for watching.